let's talk about My Hero. It's been a little while since I've done a My Hero Academia video. But there were some things that happened in the last couple of chapters that I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to. So this is going to be going over most of, new information and stuff like that we got between chapters 370, 371, and 372. Mostly new information that we have received about Shoji and Koda from, of course, Class 1A. And things that are going on like that during the fact that at the moment they are working on trying to protect this hospital where Kurogiri is being held from Spinner and a bunch of these other hediomorphed mutant, people that have the hediomorphic quirks, mutant quirks, and such like that have been, had this call to arms or a call to action as it's been referred to as, which I'm going to go over a little bit, and how we're getting these different views of the way that the hediomorphic people with quirks and such like that are being treated. So before I go into really delving into that, I did want to go over a little bit of these different types of quirks, because quirks to a degree can be categorized into four different main types, and then of course within these quirks there's different subsets within that, kind of like with the One Piece with the devil fruits. There's Logia, Paramecia, and Zoan, and Zoan are easily you turn into an animal, Paramecia are whatever the heck, and then Logia are you turn into an element. With these, it's a little bit different. There are emitter type quirks. These are things like, Kaminari has his electricity and Bakugo has his explosions. Shoto and Endeavor with their fire and their, and ice and such like that. Those ones are generally emitter quirks. This means that they are able to produce or generate a element or a substance or something like that out of their body. They may have a slight mutation that goes along with that in regards to the fact that I don't exactly know where Sero falls in this. I don't know if he falls into the emitter category, and the fact that he's able to produce tape out of his elbow, so that would fall into that category. But he also has like these mutant elbows. But for the most part, he looks pretty normal. Mina, has an emitter type quirk in the fact that she's able to produce acid to varying degrees of severity. But she also has, she is also pink, and she also has like the different eyes, and she has her little antenna horns that she has. So there's a little bit of a difference there in that regard. Then there are transformation quirks, which would be very blatant example of this is, of course, Kirishima has a transformation quirk in the fact that he is able to transform his body and make it harder. And I may be slightly missing on which ones of these are exactly which ones exactly, unfortunately, but these are kind of just the ones that are coming to mind at the moment. Also, another big one for the transformation would, of course, be, our wonderful rabbit, or not rabbit. She falls in a different category, and Mirko falls in a different category. Would be our wonderful dragon, Ryuko, because she changes into a dragon, literally, so there's that. Some of the other students in like Class 1A and B, there's not too many that are transformation type quirks. Like some of them kind of fall under that category a little bit, but not as much. And then there are the accumulation type quirks, which this is kind of what One for All falls underneath. And technically All for One as well, because he's an accumulation ability and stuff like that. And like Ares' ability falls under this as well. Fajin, Rewind, Stress, Fat Absorption that, Fat Gum has. These ones all fall under the accumulation category, and the fact that they have to build up over time in order for them to be able to use them. So there's that. And then the main one that's going to get talked about in this video for the most part are the mutant or hediomorphs or hediomorphic quirks. Very good examples of this are obviously, because I'm going to be going over them in this video, are Shoji and Koda, and the fact that they physically do not look necessarily human. Same thing with Tokogame. He technically does not look human because he has a bird head, but his quirk also manifests out of him, so that would kind of be like, I guess, an emitter type quirk. And then I think there's at least one of the students in Class 1B don't remember his name. I'm sorry. He's the one that kind of looks like Chewbacca. He kind of he's like a hediomorphic in the fact that he is a mutant. Cementos kind of also falls under that as well. I would say Hound Dog, the therapist, the counselor, he falls under this as well. And then, of course, Spinner definitely falls under this in regards to, the League of Villains. So I'm mostly going to be focusing on Shoji and Koda and then Spinner. And, of course, the setup for what I'm going to be talking about in this chapter is, of course, Central Hospital is being attacked at the moment. President Mike is there, and he is being assisted by Shoji and Koda and Tentacle and Anima and such. They're there, and they're working on trying to prevent this gigantic Spinner who has been given several quirks from All for One in order to, power him up even more. He has a gigantification quirk that has made him even larger. He has another quirk that is called Scale Mail. Another quirk that he's been giving that was called Scale Mail that will makes his scales grow and become even harder. So they're supposed to be like, armor, like scales of an armor, scales of a dragon type of a thing. And then, of course, Spinner's regular quirk is just called, I believe it's just called Gecko. And it is just literally, he looks like a gecko. My sister had a gecko when I was a kid. It died. We buried it in the backyard. My niece currently has a bearded dragon as a pet. So I'm not unfamiliar with reptiles, and I don't necessarily think, Sue is somewhat of a hediomorphic in the fact that she has like frog capabilities, she has frog, appearances and stuff like that, and like her father has a little bit more of that out of her family, but she kind of qualifies for that too. Also, we know that her friend, it's the snake lady. I think Mongoose is part of her name, but I could be wrong about that. She is also what would be a hediomorphic in the fact that she does not look generally human. She has like this human shape, but she has like different colored skin and different facial features and everything like that that make her definitely not look human. And such. And as we've seen with other characters, it's also like, sometimes you may get a quirk that is, your physical appearance may be affected by your parents' physical appearance, but that's not necessarily your quirk. Like, since we've never seen, for example, we've never seen what Fumikage's parents look like. We've never seen what his parents look like. It could be that one of them actually kind of looks like a bird, and that's why he has that physical appearance, but his quirk is not that he looks like a bird. His quirk is Dark Shadow, so there's a difference there. With Shoji, well, let me finish setting up the scenario that we have here. We have it that, of course, Spinner is trying to attack this hospital because that's where they believe that Kurogiri is being held. And the setup of this, we know that they have, Spinner is leading this giant army of hediomorphic quirk users, who, and it's supposed to be like 50,000 people that are marching up to this hospital, and like, they're being led by Spinner, and there's this other guy there that's like I don't know exactly what he's doing or whatever, but he's like trying to help like get the people to follow Spinner or whatever. And then there's about I think it's about 200 heroes and police officers and such like that, including Tentacle and Anima, that are there trying to prevent them from getting to the hospital. They of course want to get to the hospital because this is where Kurogiri is, and depending on their intention is to get to Kurogiri because he's like the best high-end Nomu to a degree that they've ever had, and they need to get to him and then play like a recording of like play a recording of, I think it's supposed to be of either Shigaraki or All for One's voice of like them telling him to do something, and then he's supposed to react to that and see what he will do. I know at the very end of this we've kind of seen that something has happened, but we don't know exactly what. At the very end of where the chapters are currently, we kind of get a little bit of a hint of something might happen, but we don't know exactly. And throughout this point, we see that, Spinner is barely there in his own mind right now. He's so probably like roided out right now that he doesn't 100% know what's going on. He's just been pointed in this direction by All for One and been like, go do this, and you will be a symbol for all the different hediomorphic quirk people. And he's not wrong. But they're on their way to the hospital, and President Mike and Anima and Tentacle are there trying to deal with them. And what we end up seeing is, of course, there's like some other heroes that are there that are helping as well, trying to slow down the group and everything like that. But kind of course, what they're trying to represent in this fight itself is a representation of Shoji and Koda, representing these people, quirk users, heroes who have hediomorphic quirks. We've seen other heroes, like Gang Orca has a hediomorphic quirk, and the fact that he is a giant orca. Same thing with Selkie. So there's several different heroes that have hediomorphic quirks. It's not just, there's like one, but there's several of them that have these types of quirks. And what we end up seeing is, of course, it's Spinner and his group are like, well, they've done nothing but cause horrible things to us. We learn about a thing that was done that was called the 6-6 incident, which is just a horrible thing that happened, apparently, within the history of the My Hero world, which, given humanity, it's also referred to as the Great Jeddah Purge. And given just what we've seen about history in the last several years and just history in general, the concept of what happened is just horrible. It was this incident that happened where a whole bunch of different hediomorphic, quirk users were slaughtered. They were massacred by people that didn't like them because of how they looked. It was just like, oh, well, if you have an emitter type quirk, or even if you have a transformation type quirk, or something along those lines, where it's just like, as long as you still look mostly human, it's fine. But you don't look human anymore, so we don't want anything to do with you. And throughout the course of these chapters, we see that this horrible incident happened at one point in time, and so many of the different hediomorphic quirk users have had these horrible things happen to them in their lives. I know that throughout, because I did read through Vigilantes, and I know that through Vigilantes we see some different instances where we see some different hediomorphic quirk users be affected by different things, or that they're targeted specifically because of the fact that they are hediomorphic, because it's just like, well, they already look like a monster, so we'll just make them even more monstrous and more horrible looking and more scary and more this and more that, and just more of a thing to make them look worse, because it goes with our goal or whatever of well, we want strong quirks, but if you don't look human enough, then we don't want anything to do with you. And we find out that this 6-6 incident, it's just a whole bunch of different hediomorphs were just brutally massacred because they look so different. And during this time frame, we have Shoji is fighting against Spinner at this point in time. He's using all of his different his octoblow, like using so many different arms. In all honesty, he kind of looks like he's trying to mimic Luffy from One Piece, and the fact that he's just like summoning up, because he can multiply his arms out, and he's just like punching away at Spinner. And I'm just like, Luffy would be very proud of you. Well done, well done. Slightly wonder if that was someone inspired by Luffy punching out Kaido, but I don't know, maybe. I mean, I think Horikoshi is a One Piece fan, to a degree, or just an homage to that. But that's kind of something that popped into my mind, just now thinking about that. And during this time, we end up getting the backstory of Shoji. We finally get his much more complete backstory for him, which, I mean, like, as a fan base, we kind of speculated at some point in time. I'm sure we thought it was, well, he's always pretty quiet, but he's always been well doing the class and everything. He seems pretty smart. The fact that when we see his room, he has minimalist anything, may incline that he doesn't have a whole, he doesn't care for possessions that much, which is fine. But what we find out is that when he was a kid, he grew up in this village where we get this in a flashback. We have it that Shoji is sitting there talking with the class. This is before they're going to go off to the final battle, and we have him sitting there talking with the class, and he ends up telling them his backstory, because at the end of the chapter, one of the previous chapters, his his mask got pulled away, and we see all these scars all over the bottom of his face, just horrible scars. And we find out that he had been in this very small town, a very, like back roads, backwater village, where anyone that had a hediomorphic quirk was at some point forced out of the town. Or he even says it's like, I didn't look like my parents. My quirk was nothing like what my parents was. So he was like a mutation quirk, as in like it was just like this random quirk that just popped up in the genes, that had nothing to do with either of his parents. I was trying to think if there was anyone that we know that has that type of a quirk. Well, some of the different students, we don't know exactly what their parents' quirks are, so we don't know if it was just like, well, we know that like Toru, we know that she's invisible and so are her parents. So that's just like genetic quirks, she's invisible too. And then, we don't know what Momo's parents' quirks are, so maybe one of their quirks may be similar to the fact that she can, use her fat lipids to produce stuff. It might be similar to what her parents can do. Or it may have just been she happened to get that type of a quirk. But because we don't know like the whole quirk family tree, so the closest one we know for a quirk family tree is Shoto's, and it's, his dad has fire, his mom has ice, Toga got fire, Fuyumi and Natsuo both kind of have ice, and then Shoto has both. And so we've seen that. And with Shoji, he just recalls that, he recalls that during the time frame when he lived in the town at one point, like he just remembers just getting beaten because like anytime that he would go out of his house or whatever, we don't know what his parents did in this regard. It may have been that his parents were on the poorer side, so they couldn't really do anything, so they didn't have the money to move, so they may have tried to keep Shoji inside a lot of the time. But whenever he would go outside, he tended to probably get, rocks thrown at him, beaten, thrown in the mud, all this other stuff. And we know that a lot of those scars came from the people that lived in the village, that lived in the town, that they were the one that did that to him. And, anytime that he would come in contact with some, they would, try to force blood cleansing. And it wasn't just him, it was to anybody in the town that ended up having like a hediomorphic quirk, which is just wrong. And then we find out that there was this incident where he ended up using his duplo arms in order to save this girl that had been washed away in this flood. And he saves her, and we get like this little flashback where we see like the little girl like, like thanking him for saving her, and he's just like, he was happy that he got to help her. He used his quirk to help save her. And then unfortunately that was probably basically what happened was, because he saved her, because he had to touch her in order to save her, a lot of the people in the town were like, oh, well, he touched the girl and now we're just going to, hurt him again just for the fact that he did. And like the little girl apologizes for the fact that the villagers gave him the scars. She's just like, I'm sorry that you got hurt because you saved me. Which I'm just like, oh, small child, you are so sweet. Don't change. So we get that, and then we also, as I stated, this is the moment where he's, sitting and talking with the class, and he's like telling them his backstory and everything. And okay, Mineta gets points here. I don't usually give Mineta points, but he's been getting some of them recently. And Mineta gets points here because he, remembers when, like, at one point in time, he remembers he called, compared Shoji to an octopus. And he's like, I'm so sorry I called you an octopus. Please forgive me. I will try to be better. And he apologizes for that. And okay, points. And Shoji's like, no, that's fine. I'm fine with that comparison. I mean, like, my hero name is Tentacle. So, it's not really that big of a leap. And, it's just like, that doesn't bother me. It's like, it's a comparison. It's not, that was not Mineta being mean. It was just, that was a comparison that he made. Even with like Mineta, I don't even think that was Mineta being mean back when it happened, but he still apologized for it. And then we have this moment that I just find adorable where he's just like, well, where Shoji's just like, well, I want to make a lot of happy memories. It's like, I have the one happy memory where I saved the girl with my quirk, and, that's what I have, and I focus on that. And all the rest of the classmates are just like, no, you need more happy memories. And they just like jump on like a snuggle pile with like Shoji in the middle, and like his arms just kind of like over everybody. And like we see Sue and like Mineta be like happy because like they were like they teamed up with Shoji during the cavalry battle way back in the sports festival. So it's just like they know what it's like to be like within his his cocoon of arms, which is adorable. And so we have that moment, and it's just like the whole class like dogpiles on Shoji, which is just so cute. And just give him, just give him affection because he needs that. And we see Koda there, and he smiles too, and everything. And Shoji is just like, I want to become, yes, I want to become the world's coolest hero because it proves that hediomorphs don't have to be ridiculed. And yeah, I mean, Mirko is somewhat of a hediomorph in the fact that she has her ears and everything, and her feet aren't necessarily 100% human looking. Admittedly, now she has robo feet, but still, robo foot and arm. Go Mirko. And we saw some of that animated in the anime recently. So, oh boy, in regards to that incident that happens with her and Shigaraki. But what we end up seeing, of course, is, Shoji and Shoji and Koda had talked to President Mike and Aizawa, and they said, well, we actually kind of know that, there's going to be an incident at the hospital. We know that they're going to attack the hospital because that's where they believe that Kurogiri is. And the reason we know this is because the giant lady, who I refer to as Snivy Lady because I don't have anything else to call her. I like the woman. I really think she's cool. And if whatever point in time we end up getting a name for her, she's like the giant, the Snivy looking lady that Izuku helped save at one point in time when he was out on his, roaming around vigilante kick. Moody teenage vigilante kick. He helped save her. And then she says it was just like, well, because I'm a hediomorph, none of the shelters want to let me in. And so, we know that UA is not that type of a place because she was welcomed in at UA. We know that All Might took her to UA and she was able to be there. And we see her there when Izuku comes back, when the class brings Izuku back and, when Araka does her big, speech and everything to, let us bring Izuku in and everything like that. We see her there. I really want her to get a name. She doesn't have a name yet. I want her to have one. At the moment, I'm just referring to her as Snivy Lady because that's kind of what she looks like, in my opinion, like that pointed nose type thing. So we have that, and we see that she talked to Shoji and Koda, and she stated that it's just like, well, there was like a call of arms or a call of action going out to all the different hediomorphs, with coming from like the Metal Liberation Army. And that they were going to go after the hospital. And she's like, well, because none of the other shelters would let me in, I kind of ended up hearing about it. And then, I came here because, Deku saved me. So we get that. And it just makes you feel worse for her. Because it's just like, you seem like such a nice lady. And we saw how kind she was being to Izuku and everything like that. And just like, you just feel sorry for her. And I really like her. I really hope at some point in time she either gets a name or I'm going to be happy when we see her animated. I like her. I don't know why, I just like her. But, Shoji and, Koda state that they want to help protect the hospital and everything because it's just like there's going to be all of these different hediomorphs going to the hospital and trying to get to where Kurogiri is. And if Shoji and Koda are there, then they can kind of do like the, they know that Spinner is going to try to, do his part and, try to, show that this is what hediomorphs have to be. They have to be these monsters if they want to have respect, and Shoji and Koda want to prove that that's not the case. And, they want to show that, no, you don't have to be a monster. And Shoji even makes the comment, because Spinner keeps shouting different things or whatever. Like he keeps trying to ask Spinner questions, and Spinner doesn't actually have like a legitimate answer for him. And like this other guy that's like being like Spinner's mouthpiece is like just kind of lying to rile up the crowd even more. And Shoji points out the fact that, you just, how is it that he phrases it? If you doing this is going to set us back so far in regards to the way that the world sees hediomorphs, that they're just going to see us as even more monstrous than we already are seen. And if you do this, you're just perpetuating that myth. And with Koda, we got some more of his backstory. Back at the beginning of the series, we did end up seeing a thing with like him and his mom where he tells his mom that he got into UA, and we just see how happy she is for him. And she looks a lot like him, and she has like, but like instead of her, she has like her horns pointed out of her ears as opposed to Koda that's like a cone on his head. And we find out in this chapter, or within these chapters, because Koda's head kind of, for lack of a better word, splits open or blooms to a degree is what happens with his horn. And we find out from his mom via the flashback. She says, well, who looks very much like Koda. She mentions that someday his horns will grow. Will also grow a secondary set of horns, and that they will allow him to, his feelings to animals will reach even farther away. And like in the chapter, we see like Koda, like little Koda just looks really happy in this regard, which is adorable. And we also see that his mom is taking care of a bunch of rabbits. So that's probably where he got his pet rabbit from, is from his mom. And she has a similar quirk, if not almost the same quirk that he does. We don't know how far back into the family that goes, but it is to a degree a hediomorphic quirk in the fact that it does physically very much change their appearance, particularly when their horns bloom more. But we found out something about Koda's father that I really, really like. Because his mom says, well, you also remind me of your father, because I think she's saying that to him. She's like, you also remind me of your father. And his dad, just from what we get in the flashback, looks fairly normal looking. Just from the little bit of the panel that we got to see of him, he looks fairly normal. But, anytime someone would insult his wife, anytime someone would insult her, call her ugly or whatever, beast or horrid or whatever it is that they would call her, or make fun of her horns or whatever, he would stand up to them, because it's just like, no, you're not going to treat my wife badly because of the way she looks. I'm not going to let you do that. And his mother implores Koda to be that type of a person that will stand up to people that are, that get angry and laugh at someone that he cares about, that is dear to him. And Koda wants to try to, we also see Koda just straight up do this great thing where we get this great combo attack between Koda and Shoji, where Koda, because like his head bloomed, and we see like all these birds appearing out of nowhere because they're being summoned there by his feelings, because he's like asking the birds for help, and because he has a more wide range of his power now, it summons them up more. And we just see all these birds come in. It's just called Hitchcock Birds, because it is a straight up reference to the movie The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock. Which, you want a movie that's going to make you terrified of birds, that'll probably do it. And he just points, basically points the birds toward the one guy that's kind of acting like a spinner's mouthpiece, and just straight up just has them like attack him. And I think they just push him off the building or whatever. And then during this time frame, Shoji is using his power to release his octospansion, which I'm trying to figure out how that works. I can't remember exactly how that works. I think it involves him like just making as much duplicate as he can of one of his arms, and then using that to try to like grab someone. We also see throughout this course of the fight that Shoji keeps getting a lot of damage taken to his limbs. But as was explained during the camp arc, that training camp arc, that if one of his duplicate limbs gets chopped off, because we saw that happen with, I think it was Moonfish or whatever his name was, we saw that one of Shoji's hands got cut off. But he states, well, because it's a duplicate hand, it's not that big of a deal. It's not like I just can't grow another one. And yeah, it hurts and bleeds for a little bit, but it doesn't really last that long, and I've kind of gotten used to being able to deal with the pain. So him taking a lot of damage in that regard is fine. I mean, like, yeah, you still probably got to worry about the blood loss, but it's not like it's going to cause a whole lot of permanent damage. For the way that he's able to, out of his limbs, he can grow more hands, more eyes, more mouths, probably more feet if necessary, but not so much the case that we're dealing with here. So we see that, and he's just like, going against Spinner as much as he can and trying. Well, the thing with Spinner And we get some of this a little bit more referenced in these chapters for Spinner's backstory, and it was referenced before. Spinner, of course, one of the reasons why I'm wearing the Stain arc shirt is because Spinner is, of course, very much influenced by Stain. We know that Spinner was this very much, recluse in his home because he'd been ostracized so much for the way that he looks. He just basically holed himself up in his house and played video games all day. I do not remember what Spinner's age is. I think he's a little bit older than a high school student, but I do not remember what his age is, so I apologize. If anybody knows that, that's fine, but I just don't remember that off the top of my head. If his age has been given, it probably has been. But we see him, that he was just like kind of not wasting away in his room, but he did a lot of video games and everything like that. We kind of hear that he played League of Legends is, I guess, one of them. There's like a few other bits that, we know that he played, and we get these flashbacks where, he saw what happened with Stain and everything, and like heard Stain's speech and whatever that they had, broadcasted all over the news back when that happened. And that, that empowered Spinner. And then he went and he, of course, joined the League of Villains and was part of the Vanguard Action Squad and everything. And he has started to become more confident in himself. And of course, then, fighting against Izuku and his friends at the camp and then other areas and, dealing with the Liberation Army. And then, of course, becoming a commander within the army probably helped a lot of his self-esteem. But we also know that All For One is a master manipulator, and he has basically kind of helped manipulate Spinner even more, using any weaknesses that he has learned from, Tomura, from being connected to Tomura to, manipulate Spinner even more in regard to the fact that, Spinner wants to be seen as a hero, or he wants to be seen as something along those lines, and that's where, All For One is manipulating him with that, you want to be this representation for Heliomorphs, you want to be this hero for them, so that's what I'm going to turn you into. And it's basically turning him into, well, given the fact that he's had a bunch of quirks shoved into him, he's probably somewhat on the line of similar to a Nomu. But because we don't know exactly how many quirks have to go into someone to make them a Nomu, to make them qualify as that, we don't know exactly how many, if you have to start out as dead with all the quirks shoved into you or nearly dead before you're considered a Nomu. I don't remember if we ever get an exact answer on that. But his brain function has gone so far down for Spinner, unfortunately, with all of these different quirks going through him and everything, and probably like a rage quirk thrown in there as well, just to give him even more of a stamina boost or more of a strength boost. Because he's basically acting as a giant tank that All For One has just pointed up this hospital and said, here, go that way, do what you need to do, get to Kurogiri, and then activate his quirk. Play this recording, and I'll activate his quirk, and he'll know what to do. And then lead all these other Heliomorphs there. By technicality, I would probably say that's also All For One using it as a way to just exploit even more of people's discomfort for the Heliomorphs and just make them even, make them despised even more, because it helps with his plan again and again and again. And it's just, you just see a lot of that in this chapter, in these last couple of chapters, where it's just like these different, I don't know, how do I put that? Different, conflicting, sorry, that was a word I was looking for, different conflicting points of view in that regard. And the fact that, Shoji and Koda both want to, and, any of the other Heliomorphic students, and I think I don't remember if we've seen any other students outside of Class 1A or 1B, because none of the power trio for Mirio and the others are, well, no, none of them are Heliomorphic because they look human. I mean, Sun Eater has, he has a transformation quirk of the fact that he eats something and he can transform into parts of that animal. So that's different. But I was trying to think if there were any other specific ones that I could think of. I think there's a couple of other heroes that we've seen that have been Heliomorphic heroes. And the thing is within Japan, this might just be the way that they are treated, whereas in other parts of the world, they may not be as treated as poorly. And it all just depends. We've seen a couple of other villains that are hediomorphs, as I mentioned, Spinner. I was trying to think if there were any other ones that we saw within um, some of the other organizations. Well, kind of the first villain that we see at the beginning of the series, that's like, I don't know, holding up a family hostage on a bridge or whatever. That's the first villain that we see way at the beginning of the series. We see him. He's kind of a hediomorph in the fact that he does not look human. The sludge villain is kind of a left up for debate. I don't know if he qualifies as human or if he qualifies as a transformation, because I don't know. I don't remember if we ever get whether or not he can like just turn back into a normal looking human or not. I don't know. Um, but we see a lot of different examples of that. And as so many people know, My Hero Academia is very much taking references from X-Men. And within X-Men, there are a lot of different mutants that have hediomorphic powers. One of them, most famously, is Beast, who is, of course, the blue fuzzy guy. If you have ever seen anything like that, he is very much a hediomorph. One that is a superhero in Marvel, but is not a hediomorph, but is or has hediomorphic capabilities to a degree, is also the Thing from the Fantastic Four. And the fact that he is physically stuck in that form, he cannot change out of that form without an outside influence. Um, all of the different Hulks kind of more qualify as transformation quirks, and the fact that they have to physically activate that in order for them to look different. Otherwise, Bruce and She-Hulk look pretty normal when they're not in their Hulk forms. Same thing with Abomination, same thing with, so many of the other ones. But, so there's a bunch of different those variations that we see when it comes to other representations of like hediomorphic shifters or hediomorphic power users. And within the My Hero world, what they're showing is this, clashing of ideals in regards to Spinner and all of these other hediomorphs that are following him at the time have been riled up so much because they've seen what's happened to the world. They've seen, to a degree, how they've been treated because of the fact that they look so different. And they want representation. They want to be able to, well, not fully representation, well, they do want that, but they want to be able to not be ridiculed for the fact of just how they look, just for the fact that their quirk made them this way. They don't want to be ridiculed for that. And we saw bits of that way back when we get flashbacks to like when quirks were new. We see there's this moment, and I think we saw it more recently in the anime, where, All For One takes this quirk from one guy and gives it to a guy that's quirkless, and it's the guy that has the quirk already has like this more mutated look and everything. He very much has a hediomorphic quirk, and we just see All For One take that from him and then put it into this other guy. So that way the one that had a quirk no longer has one, and he can now go home to his family because he looks normal again. And then the guy who is quirkless at the time now has this quirk, and now he can actually defend himself more. From what we've seen, none of the previous holders of All For One, of One For All, were hediomorphic. None of them were. They all seem to have an emitter or a accumulation type quirk. None of them seem to have a transformation or a hediomorphic type quirk by any means. Nope, all of them were either emitter or accumulation quirks. And then they've been powered up subsequently, obviously. But it's this very interesting idea where it's just like, yeah, Spinner is doing that side of things, and then Shoji and Koda are trying to do like the other end of that argument, where it's a debate with fists and lives on the line is kind of what's going on. It's an idealistic debate with fists and quirks and death and stuff like that going on in the background, foreground, all the ground. So we see that. So we'll see more probably in the next couple of chapters in regards to either what Kurogiri will do, see what's going on with that, but also what's going to happen with Spinner now. What are Shoji and Koda going to do at this point in time? But yeah, the frame of like Koda with his head opening up, I'm like, that is both cool and and scary at the same time for different reasons. It's just like, your head opened up. Oh my god, why? No, it's okay, it's my power. Okay, that's cool, but still scary. Um, and yeah, just the scars on Shoji's face. Oh god, those just look very painful. Again, we don't know exactly, as you said, he doesn't look like his parents. We don't know exactly what his parents thought of his quirk. It may have been like, well, he's our son, so we'll keep him inside and keep him safe. And they may not have, you know, subscribed to everything that was going on in the town, and they did what they could to keep him safe, but it didn't go well a lot of the time. But he did save the little girl, and the villagers didn't really care. It's just like, oh, you touched her, so we're just going to cause you even more pain, which is just effed up. So that's what I have for this. Wanted to talk about Shoji and Koda in this regard, and Spinner in this regard. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Depending on what else happens in My Hero soon, I might be doing some more My Hero videos. So that's what I have. I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. Saving someone always comes with a risk. Heroes aren't called heroes for nothing.